Hey, Nat, good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Jacksonville.
Thank you for taking time with us this morning, man.
All right.
You got a nice place you got here. I didn't know you had all this going on down here.
Well, look, Jacksonville is a great city, and the JTA is a great organization, and I'm just, I'm pleased to be here, and it's great to see you.
It's good to be here. I'm mindful of your time, Nat. This will take about 10 minutes. I want to talk to you about the Comto Leadership Institute.
Yes.
But before we get into that, I want you to share with our audience, and our audience are our young people, our interns and emerging leaders. Tell us about your background and what you've been doing.
Well, just in terms of my background, I never planned really to be in public transportation, but very early on, watching my father, who worked for the New York City Transit System and worked his way up through the ranks, it kind of became part of my DNA, just the whole challenge of running one of the largest transit systems in the world. And I saw what it took, his dedication and commitment. So at some point, needing a job, I took a job as a train conductor with New York City Transit, and probably had my eyes on the next job a few minutes after I got that one. But I was very fortunate. I came in at a good time for my career, that there was a lot of change occurring in New York City.
When was that? When did you start?
I started in early 80s,
Early 80s.
81, 82.
Straight out of college?
Yes. I kind of broke that up. I went to college for a couple of years, then stepped out of college and took the job with with New York City Transit, and then continued my education, as a full-time, as a part-time student, as a full-time employee.
You graduated from Mercer College.
Yes, I graduated from Mercer College, and so I advanced my career a great deal, and along the way, taking courses, college courses and things of that nature, and ultimately got my associate's degree in San Francisco and a bachelor's degree in Georgia.
So you've had several of the larger transit systems, haven't you?
Yes, and so after working my way up to a management position in New York, I then went to work for BART in the BART system, and worked there for about 5 years, and got recruited and came to Atlanta. Started out as Senior VP of Operations, eventually Executive Vice President of Operations and Development, and CEO in 2000. And about 5 years later, got recruited once again for the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Authority. So back to the Bay Area, but not affiliated, partnership with BART, but really running all of parking, traffic, public transit, taxis, all of the transportation for the city.
So you've gone full circle. You've seen the operations, you've seen the boardroom, how that all works. So now that you're in Jacksonville, is it all coming together for you here?
Oh, definitely. All of those experiences, really helped to shape my perspective and attitude towards running the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. From the basic knowledge and really, day-to-day running of a New York City transit system, and what that takes to really have the core basic knowledge of how that works on a daily basis, and that tension and pressure of running that kind of an organization. And then moving to BART, which was one of the newer systems, one of the newer systems in the country, and running a commuter operation, which was a little bit different, an operation that touched different cities and communities, and not necessarily—
Almost like a regional transit.
More like a regional transportation system. And then, the career changed, and coming to MARTA. And MARTA also kind of the same pedigree as BART in terms of age, but coming to a community that was still trying to develop its attitudes about public transportation. And even today, I think MARTA still is working on those issues in terms of public transportation and who utilizes it.
But you've seen MARTA grow over the
Yes, and so I came there right after the Olympics. A great deal of success. I don't think it's a secret that MARTA had a key role in Atlanta landing those Olympics and helping to transport.
So your colleagues, Bev Scott and Keith and those guys, so you guys on that same train together.
We were all on that same train together, and they've done a fine job taking those next steps, because most recently I know that they're in Clayton County, providing service and getting outside of the boundaries that MARTA found itself kind of limited in.
I want to switch gears on you real quick and talk to you about Comto. How long have you been a Comto member?
Actively, I would say my career, my involvement with Comto dates at least 20, 25 years. I've been
25 years?
Yeah, I've been in the industry total about 32, 33. And once I've gotten to the management ranks, that's when I started to first became aware of Comto, and then actively participating either locally in a chapter and participating in every agency, taking a leadership role in terms of local chapter.
I've got to tell you, Nat, that you hosted the conference here in Jacksonville a year ago.
Yes.
Really great job, man. It was super, really super.
Well, interesting, that was really the third conference that I was intimately involved with in terms of Comto, because while I was in Atlanta, we hosted two.
Right.
And then we hosted the one here in Jacksonville. So for the Jacksonville folks, I walked in the door and 6 months later, I've got this conference, and I think we really stepped it up to make
so you
sure
just took it off the shelf and replayed
Oh,
the same
definitely. It's important that when you're hosting a conference like that, that people feel welcome and that we make it a great experience.
The chapter did a magnificent job. I was here. Secretary Hagel stopped by and kind of made it special. But I wanted to thank you. It was a great conference. So then moving from Jacksonville, last year in Atlanta.
Yes.
What did you think about the Atlanta conference?
I think the Atlanta conference was a great conference, for a bit of a coming home for me, because I think a lot of my executive CEO experience came out of Atlanta and developed and honed a lot of my skills. And to come back and see some of the former employees, and then at the same time see my colleagues from around the country, it's fantastic. Atlanta's a great place.
It is a good country. Keith did a good job hosting that, and we're looking
Hats
forward.
off to him and the Comto team there.
And we're going to Boston from here, and also your application where you got a chance to show off JTA's application in the registration area was great.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
We have a great team here in Jacksonville, and we're trying to expand their opportunities and exposure. So it's very important to me, I think, as it relates to Comto, that my organization, the staff here at the JTA, are exposed to these other transit systems and communities and network, and get that experience and bring it back to Jacksonville, so we have a better transportation agency.
You know as well as anybody, sponsorship and getting folks to support you. What is your conversation with CSX and other sponsors? They were all here for your conference.
Right.
What's the value added for Comto for them to come here and be a part of us?
Well, I think it's clearly a value for them. It's a value for Comto in terms of those dollars help shape the conference. We could have a very robust event and have a lot of activities that are not just for the participants, but the family members and things of that nature. So it just goes without saying you need those sponsorship dollars. But I've also gone to sponsors or CSXs and the Jacksonville Port, for example, and some of those organizations, and the airport here, and actually told them this is where you're going to find the cream of the crop.
Right.
And this is the opportunity for you to come to a conference or participate in this conference and find your next CFO, your next Chief Operating Officer, and individuals that have some broad experience in it.
Or your next media strategist.
Or your next media strategist. So I think it's a win-win on both sides, for the sponsors and definitely for the Comto organization.
Would that be the same word of advice you would give to Celia Blue up in Boston as they get ready for the 44th conference?
Definitely. And so the team of individuals who come from Jacksonville or any of our chapters, those are the best and the brightest in our industry. People of color who have worked very hard to establish themselves and develop their skills. And so I think the sponsors have an opportunity to sit down and network with them and look at a talent pool, and also look at business opportunities.
Right. So it's about business, is what you're saying.
That's right.
You've seen Comto grow in the last few years, haven't you?
Yes,
Talk
definitely.
to me about that.
I've seen it grown, and I think a natural progression that any organization needs, and the changes that they need to make to be relevant and viable, particularly what's happening in terms of reaching out to individuals that are not familiar, the youth, and trying to attract them to look at our industry as a place to advance and develop a great career. And so, I think where a great deal of focus in the very beginning was developing and creating opportunities for the members.
Right.
Now we're looking at how we can be more relevant in the far future by creating that pipeline of young folks coming into this industry.
In Atlanta,
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Yeah. In Atlanta, you got to see all of the city interns and the scholars and emerging leaders. In fact, at lunch, you got a chance to speak to them.
Yes.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, I think at this stage, in terms of my career and development, having led all these organizations, it gives me an opportunity to give back. And it may be just a couple of minutes, but I enjoy that conversation more than any other conversation I have in terms of my workload. And so it's my opportunity to just impart, if it's just one person in that room that grabs something from that conversation and inspires them or encourages them to strive a little harder, to have a little insight, and be the next Nat Ford of the world in our industry.
Well, you know that we're putting more and more emphasis on youth, and having you and other senior leaders in the same room at the same time.
Oh, yes.
And having young people be able to hear your voice and then look and see General George Bowman or Bev Scott all in the same room.
Yeah,
that's golden. You
golden.
can't do that any place but Comto.
That's right.
And
that's right.
so you're by default, you're part of our whole academic structure, man. So thank you so much for doing that. Let's talk about interns here in Jacksonville this year. Yes. I know you want to have some.
That's right. So immediately after Atlanta, I came to you and said, look, well, where are my interns? And again, as a father of four and raising young people, it's important that we just give them all that we can. And so I'm looking for that opportunity to have some interns here in Jacksonville and give them our best.
Are you going to give them some time with you as part of their 10 weeks here?
Yes. I've had interns for different programs. In fact, we had interns from the city of Jacksonville this past year. And I've always made it a point that they're not sitting working in the copier room or running to get coffee and things of that nature. They're in the midst of things. So they're sitting in staff meetings. They're sitting next to me and seeing what my day looks like. So I carve out that time to make that happen. And so we're not just creating an environment for someone to come in and, like I said, do low-level work, menial work.
If you had 2 or 3 interns, where would you place them?
I think clearly I would want them in our finance and administration area, really looking at how we run the business from a financial standpoint.
So you're looking for a business major then?
I'm looking for a business major in that particular case. I'm looking for long-range planning and strategic planning. So I would look for an intern to work in that particular area as it relates to where the city of Jacksonville and Northeast Florida is going into the future, and for them to be part of developing the plans that'll be in place, implemented the next 5, 10, 15 years. I would also look at someone who would work in my space, the forward-facing government relations, community relations area, and how marketing and media and positioning the organization to be relevant to not just our transit riders, but relevant to folks who support it and don't ride the system, business leaders. Taxpayers who, who may not use transit, but we may need to make it relevant for them to continue to support it.
Now you mentioned earlier that even here in Jacksonville, you're starting to expand out further and further to a regional concept. Is that?
Yes.
So do you see the interns and the emerging leaders being part of that growth over time?
Definitely. There is going to be a need for transportation professionals in this community, and we are at this point medium-sized transit system in terms of scale, but the regional transportation concept is already under discussion. We have started providing service in some of the outer counties and are in discussions with them, but it's going to need to be knitted together into a large Northeast Florida regional transportation network. With that, we will need talented individuals.
So you want to grow your own, is what you're saying, right?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about your time with APTA.
Yes.
You've been there for quite a while. Compare APTA and Comto and their missions.
And very similar, but there are some distinctions. And I think, APTA has its role, and it's doing a lot of the same work that Comto is doing, but on a much broader scale, looking at the entire policy making framework in terms of our funding bill at the federal level, involving all of the businesses as well as agencies around the country. So they have that role, being the voice for transportation, the major advocate and collection point for all perspectives as it relates to transportation. Comto has a unique it has all of that plus a unique charge, which is to ensure that minorities, people of color, have the ability to participate in that and have an active role in that and have their skills, again, developed and honed to be an active participant at the grander level. And at this point, I think Comto is evolved to be exactly a peer in some ways of APTA.
So it's a good partnership.
It's an extremely well thought out and good partnership. Again, in the very beginnings, it was about making sure that we weren't just sitting, driving the bus or operating the train.
But in the boardroom.
But we were in the boardroom, we were in the C-suite, and making sure that we were prepared for those opportunities. And a venue was created that you could clearly see who those individuals are. Now, I think there's a bit of a transition, which is continuing that pipeline, and more importantly, doing some of the advocacy work in our communities.
Right, outreach.
And outreach in our communities and making sure we're relevant.
When Comto first started, it was mostly transit focused, and over the years, you've seen it go to become more multimodal. Even here, and I know you and Chairman Bob Prince have talked about reaching out to the ports. In fact, you have a young lady here who's helping Bob. She's on the board. Aisha Eccleston is helping. She's working with you to bring more ports into Comto, is that right?
Yes, exactly. So we're working very closely with her. When I arrived here at the JTA, there was, and that has been historic, there was a focus on the JTA. We are the large public transit provider here, and we began, much in line with the national office, began the efforts to bring the port in, to bring the airport in. And I was happy to see her at our conference and being an active participant in our conference and seeing that some of the folks that we deal with in terms of public transit are the same individuals and organizations that are trying to do business and work with the ports. And there is, I think, a need for greater development in those other areas.
Well, not just ports. As I came in from the airport, we came across the bridge, the name of the bridge, the
Dames Point?
And that's a federal highways funded project.
That's right.
So your portfolio crosses most of DOT.
Yes, the JTA, in addition to our public transportation, public transit responsibilities, are also responsible for building bridges and roads here in Duval County. And the Dames Point Bridge is an iconic bridge that the JTA built some years ago that has gotten world renown in terms of its design and its purpose. And so we have in our portfolio not just the public transit element, we have the roads element. And so if you came to the JTA, you're going to learn all about transportation. And frankly, in terms of Jacksonville in general, one of the names or one of the acronyms for Jacksonville is Logistics Capital of the U.S. because we have the port, we have CSX here, and so strong freight railroad corporations.
So it all kind of like Union Station, it all comes together.
It all comes together here, and a pretty robust public transportation system. So you can actually bring a container into Jacksonville and pretty much within 24 hours get it almost to the West Coast. Jacksonville is much further west than people imagine, and with the container coming in, loading it either onto a truck. We have a very robust highway system. That's part of the JTA's responsibilities, came out of the need for an expressway authority back in the 50s to make sure that the port and residents had great access to the interstate highway system. And with that, you now have I-75, 95, and I-10. I-10 runs all the way from the East Coast
straight
across the nation. And so there is, beyond the JTA, for Comto members and Comto in general, this is where it all knits together. Freight railroad, public transportation, the port, trucking, logistics and trucking, and our airport.
And what it takes to make all that move.
Exactly.
So Comto's moving the nation is
right in line. It's right in line.
This has been a year of transition for us. It's been a tough year, as you know.
Yes.
But I need to thank you personally in that, because during this year you've been such a stalwart and a supporter for the national office, and you were a big supporter for the Atlanta conference, and I really appreciate it. And we need that same type of support for Boston and beyond.
Well, you have that from Nat Ford. If it weren't for Comto in the early formative years of my career, the network that it placed at my feet that I could tap into the Bob Princes of the world, the Shirley DeLibrios. You hear those names, you know those names but to be in an environment where it was very comfortable and easy to engage them and talk about your career and talk about your aspirations and have that network that you could tap into 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when you were making very difficult changing decisions. To have that kind of network was invaluable, and I have a responsibility to do the same and be available.
Doing that well too. I'm going to ask you for two pieces of advice. First, to young leaders out there, what would be your sage words of advice to a young person coming into the industry?
I think perseverance, and I think preparation. I think there's a certain level of study, tenacity, to reach the C level, to get in that C-suite. There's a level of commitment and work and dedication that I don't think a lot of people realize, and I think that would be my few words of, if you want to be there, you really need to want to be there. You're going to have to do the work to get there. I think integrity and relationships are important. Along the way, you're going to have difficult decisions to make, and if you look at loyalty, integrity, and making sure that you have a servant perspective and you're making those decisions from the right point of departure, and that you're a servant first and you're serving your boss, you're serving your community. Those things pay off for you. You're serving your fellow colleague. Those things, there's no shortcuts, there's no kind of I win, you lose. If you truly come from the right spirit and the right departure point, it'll work out for you in the long run.
A few years back, you go to a Comto conference and you would see 2 or 3 young people.
Yes.
Now you'll see
dozens.
How does that make you feel?
I love it. I love it. And I've looked at those young faces and I get a smile. A smile comes to my face because I see our future, and I remember way back when I was that face. Maybe not as young, but with the same spirit.
Comto National Office, we were looking for more supporters and the larger corporations to come in. What is our value proposition to CSX and to your donor base?
Yeah, the value for them, particularly at CSX, is they are challenged, just like we all are, of finding talented individuals. We all are challenged with that, be it in our technical areas, our back office areas, planning, support, finance, HR, operations and maintenance. All of those areas we are challenged and competing for talented individuals. I think the value proposition for them is they'll have that ability to, one, come to a Comto event or to Comto and be able to pull those types of individuals.
Firsthand.
You get face-to-face, and you're getting some of the best individuals. You're getting the best individuals, some of the best individuals in this industry. I think there's also a value proposition in terms of, and this has always been my philosophy, where would you have a conference where you have the CEOs of some of the most influential or impactful organizations in this country all in one area, one city at one time. And so the conferences, I think, is a great opportunity for business owners and corporations to come and network. And we, as CEOs and board members of these organizations, are well aware of that relationship and the impact of those relationships. It's rather late to try and build that relationship in the boardroom. It's too late then. So here you have a seat at the table. So here's an informal environment, a very receptive environment. We all understand what these corporations are trying to accomplish, and we make ourselves available to sit down and have a conversation with businesses and explain to them how to do business with our organization. Ken Middleton, who's my head of DBE and very active Comto member, he will be at every Comto conference, and his job, I'm not sending him there just to network. His job is to go and show and network with corporations and business that want to.
But it's a little more than that now. You guys have such a great DBE program here. I know.
Oh yeah,
I know. Talk to me about
but
that.
that's part of it.
Job.
Yeah, that's part.
You've got a big focus on DBEs.
Yes.
You want to share that?
Yes. So our target this year was 16%, and at the end of fiscal year 2014, we were at 22%. And you know, I know Ken's going to get a chance to see this interview, but he knows that he will tell you that Nat's not satisfied with that.
He told me in the car he's not satisfied.
I'm not satisfied, and it's been my experience to have much higher numbers. We are working to help here locally develop. Here locally and nationally, obviously, but definitely locally, to develop the pool of DBEs that can participate in the success of the JTA. We recently got our gas tax extended, so that will allow us to put $100 million in road projects out over the next 5 years. As part of that program, before the work and the RFPs actually come out on the street, we're implementing an owner-supplied insurance program to make it easier to enter for small businesses and DBEs. In terms of our programs, we will provide insurance. Doing similar things. We will also be holding an academy where we will actually be training DBEs. It's a voluntary academy that we've set up to work on estimating, contract interpretation.
Where is that going to be?
I think we identified one of the colleges that we're actually going to be hosting this academy.
When is that?
And it'll be a series, starting in the first of the year, a series of 5 to 6 courses that we will deliver, no charge.
Why wouldn't we film that and share it with Comto National?
Oh, definitely. We would love to do that.
Let's do it.
We're going to use that, that program to help elevate their skills. We recently had an outreach event at one of our junior colleges where we had all of the interested parties, both primes and DBE program, firms, all together to hear about all of our capital projects. From the JTA Mobility Works, which are the $100 million in road projects, we've recently assumed responsibility for a ferry. We have a bus rapid transit program that's being developed.
For the ferry?
Yeah, we have a ferry. We're assuming responsibility for the St. John's River Ferry. In the spring time frame, we're negotiating the transfer. And they have capital needs and projects that need to get it in a state of good repair. We have the bus rapid transit program. That's a First Coast Flyer program, 5 corridors that'll be under construction over the next 5 years. First phase will be in service December 15th in conjunction with compressed natural gas.
Wow.
Building, so we have a lot of work that's going to be coming down the pipeline, and we needed to do the preliminary work to make sure that everyone can fully participate in that work.
You're looking at what your portfolio is versus, let's say, what Phil Washington's is. None of these agencies are doing the same thing. You're building stuff and moving people, and some agencies are just moving people. Is that fair to say?
Well, there's a difference in all, all of our agencies are a bit different in terms of the developmental phase. And, for Jacksonville, public transportation was not at the forefront.
Right.
Actually, roads and bridge building was at the forefront.
There's related. A lot of water right here.
Yeah, a lot of water, and it's all related to, supporting the movement of goods from the port and for the railroads and things of that nature. Here, we are going into a transformation now where we need a robust public transportation system. Our business leaders know that, our university leaders know that, our elected officials know that, and that's why we recently did the transformation, the route optimization initiative, and totally revamped all of our routes effective December 1st. So we just completed that. At the same time, though, we need some road infrastructure improvements to be completed, and we also need to look at alternative fuels and bus rapid transit.
I've got 2 more questions, and I promise this will end the interview. One is we have a CEO summit at Comto, and you're part of that. What are your thoughts about that?
I thoroughly enjoy those CEO summits. It gives a chance for me to, in a confidential, semi-confidential manner, have open discussions with my fellow CEOs. We're all in the same room. We get a chance to talk about what's happening in our particular agency, in our particular part of the world. We talk about the challenges of being a CEO and how, what we're doing to solve those issues. And so over the years, I've had it as an opportunity to, I would imagine, learn from my fellow CEOs as well as share some things and learnings that I've had with my CEOs. So I want that program to continue.
So when
far
you're
the
sitting in
future.
a room with, let's say, Terry Rule from CH Hill or Jerry Primo from AECOM, there's exchange going on that's value to both of you, is that right?
Yes, there is a value to that exchange, and I know that there's a healthy debate about the private sector CEOs and the agency heads, and should we all be in the same room? But I think that it needs to develop. I think that's something that is up for discussion, and there's things to learn from the private sector. Right. And there's things that they learn from us as their clients.
There's such power and passion in the room, though, that it's kind of hard to
everybody wants to be. Everyone wants to be in that room, and it's how do you find the right venue for it? And maybe there's a way to bifurcate it. That there's a portion that is the CEOs from the public agencies. Okay. Maybe there's a portion of the CEOs that are from the private sector, because there's things they would like to share, and maybe there's a coming together.
Well, from the national office, I'm just glad to see you all in the same room, because it's a shared energy.
And we need their support, and so you have to find the appropriate and adequate way for their participation to be more than just writing a check.
Comto's stronger. You guys are on the move. I would just ask that we kind of rededicate ourselves to make 2015 kind of the best ever.
Definitely. It goes without question. Each year we should build upon the success of the previous year, and I would say 2015 is going to be better. Right. So I'm claiming that victory already, but it's going to be better.
Nat, we could talk forever. I appreciate your time. I'm going to give you the last word, sir. Well,
no, thank you for the opportunity. I think it's great that you're doing these interviews and capturing the history of our industry, and what we're doing today and the message this interview is something that may help someone in the future. And so by capturing these conversations, I'm looking forward to seeing my colleagues' interviews with you and their thoughts. And so we all learn from each other. And so I'm looking forward to learning from them and whatever I can to help teach. Thank you.